The quiet town of Maple Creek, nestled between sprawling hills and winding rivers, was a place where time moved a little slower. It was a town of morning coffee on front porches, handwritten letters, and neighbors who still remembered birthdays. In this town lived a man named Walter Granger. Walter was 82 years old. His silver hair and deep-set wrinkles carried the wisdom of time, and his gentle eyes held stories no book could contain. He had spent most of his life as a schoolteacher, guiding young minds and reminding them that the world was not just about tests and grades but about choices and values. Walter lived alone now. His wife, Margaret, had passed away 6 years earlier. Their love had spanned 53 years. Even now, Walter kept a framed photo of her on the mantel, next to an old clock she adored. Every evening, he'd glance at it as if waiting for her soft voice to whisper through the ticking hands. One summer evening, Walter was invited by the town library to speak to a group of high school seniors. The librarian, a kind woman named Rebecca Thompson, called and said, "Mr. Granger, we'd love for you to share life lessons with our graduating class. The students need someone real, not another speech from a politician or motivational guru." Walter chuckled on the other end. "Well, I can't promise to inspire, but I sure can speak the truth." The event was held in the library's main hall. Rows of students filled the seats, most of them distracted by their phones or talking to each other in hushed tones. But when Walter stepped up to the podium with his worn-out notebook and warm presence, the room slowly hushed. He looked over the young faces before him and said, "I'm not here to give you advice. I'm here to share stories. Stories that taught me lessons that changed the way I lived. And maybe, just maybe, they'll do the same for you." The room settled in. And Walter began. "When I was your age," he started, "I believed the world owed me something. I thought success would come quickly and that love was easy. I thought being right mattered more than being kind. I was wrong about all of that." He paused and smiled softly. "The first real lesson I ever learned came from a man named Harold Jenkins. He was my first boss when I worked at a gas station after high school. I was clumsy and full of pride. One day I messed up a fuel order and cost the station a good chunk of money. I expected Harold to yell, maybe even fire me. Instead, he called me into his office, handed me a soda and said, 'Walter, everyone makes mistakes. The real test is whether you learn from it.'" Walter turned the page in his notebook. The students were silent now. That moment changed how I saw failure. Before that I feared it. But Harold showed me that mistakes weren't the end. They were beginnings. And that changed how I approached everything. When you stop fearing failure, you start really living. He looked around the room. The second lesson came from my wife, Margaret. We met at a community dance. She wore a yellow dress and laughed like the sun itself. We were married young. And like all couples, we had our share of arguments. One day, after a particularly bad fight, I stormed out and stayed at a friend's place. When I came back the next day, ready to defend myself, Margaret didn't say a word. Instead, she handed me a note that said, "Being right is not more important than being close." Walter's voice softened. That was when I learned the power of humility in relationships. Pride can build walls, but humility builds bridges. From that day on, I stopped needing to win and started choosing to understand. And believe me, that saved our marriage more times than I can count. A boy in the back raised his hand. "Mr. Granger, did you ever feel like you were living the wrong life?" Walter nodded. "Many times. Especially when my father passed away. I was 34. He had always been my compass. His death shook me deeply. I began to question everything. My career, my choices, even my purpose. I took a month off and went to the mountains alone. And in that stillness, I remembered something he once told me. The only wrong life is the one lived without intention. I realized then I had been drifting, doing things because I was supposed to, not because I chose to." He continued. "So I went back home and made a list. I asked myself, what do I care about? What kind of man do I want to be remembered as?" That list became my guide. Every decision I made after that came from intention, not obligation. That's when life started to feel right. A girl near the front asked, "What would you say to someone who feels lost right now?" Walter walked down from the podium and stood among them. Feeling lost is not a bad thing. It means you're aware that something isn't working. That awareness is the start of transformation. When you feel lost, don't rush to fix it. Sit with it. Ask it questions. Your soul is trying to talk to you. He took a breath. We're taught to always be busy, to always know the answer. But some of the best answers I ever found came when I was still. When I allowed myself to be uncomfortable. When I listened to what life was trying to show me. Another student, a tall young man named Tyler, asked, "What's one thing you regret?" Walter looked down, thoughtful. "I regret not saying, 'I love you' more often to the people who mattered." We think they know. We think there's time. But there isn't always. He looked at the photo in his wallet. Margaret, smiling beside a lake. The day Margaret passed, I was supposed to be out of town. But I cancelled the trip last minute. Something told me to stay. That night, she sat by the window, sipping tea, and we watched the rain fall. I told her I loved her. Really told her. The next morning, she was gone. That night, I learned that saying how you feel isn't just for them. It's for you too. The room was still, many eyes glossy with emotion. Walter smiled. There's one more thing. It's about time. When you're young, you think you have an endless supply of it. But the truth is, time is the most valuable thing you'll ever own. More than money, more than property, more than status. He held up his watch. This belonged to my grandfather. He told me, "Don't just count the hours. Make the hours count." That's why I started writing letters every Sunday to my kids and grandkids. Not emails, letters. Because time, when given with presence, becomes a gift. He turned back to the podium. So, if you remember nothing else, remember this. Live with intention. Be kind more than you're right. Speak your heart before it's too late. And give your time like it's gold. Because once it's gone, it's gone. As the students stood and clapped, Walter didn't feel old. He felt useful, alive. He saw in their eyes a flicker of reflection, a seed of change. That night, he sat by his fireplace, notebook on his lap, and wrote, "After these life lessons, they'll change how they do everything. Just like they changed me." And perhaps, somewhere in Maple Creek, a young man called his mother to say he loved her. A young woman finally decided to follow her passion instead of her fear. And maybe, just maybe, someone put down their phone and listened to life.